I discovered philosophy through Jeet Kune Do when I was about 14. I began training when I was 10 in 1984 at a rather disreputable and cartoonish chain school that ripped off American Kempo. Despite being disreputable, it did teach me how to hurt people, which I would do in school, proving that it is not the art, it is how you train it and your attitude when you use it. I nearly got expelled for this incident, and my parents forbade me from training for about a year. In my defense, I grew up in Stockton, California. Forbes magazine ranks Stockton as the 7th most dangerous city in the United States in, I believe, 2011. It was a hell of a lot nicer in 2011 than the late 80s and 90s. Every city has its armpit, and for Stockton that's the south side, which my school sat right in the middle of. I did not get in a fight with choir boys. When they finally let me resume, I had to find a school which was close by. Luckily for me, there was this Eskrima school, ran by a pretty legendary teacher. I loved it, but the concentration on the stick made me really hungry for more empty-handed stuff. Later on, I would begin training in Goju-Ryu and then eventually move on to other things, but in the interim, I started buying and practicing things from books, mostly Jeet Kune Do books. Most JKD people will tell you they got into it because they saw Enter the Dragon or Fist of Fury and were blown away by Bruce Lee and wanted to emulate him. I had seen those movies and I was blown away by Bruce, but I never had much of a desire to copy him. What made me a JKD guy were the books. It was the practicality. Everything was contact-oriented, often in street clothes, lots of sparring, and the movements just felt natural. The whole thing just made more sense to me. Being contact-oriented and lots of sparring are common today, but in the mid to late 80s it was pretty groundbreaking, at least for me. Back then, people more strongly identified with a style or school, and those schools focused too much on katas and other training methods, which kept large groups of people busy and exposed the school to as little risk as possible. When I eventually got the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, probably Bruce's most famous book, I was exposed to the philosophical aspect of the art. I found the lines in the first part incredibly profound and helpful. One that sticks with me now is, "Turn into a doll made of wood. It has no ego, it thinks nothing, it is not grasping or sticky. Let the body and limbs work themselves out in accordance with the discipline they have undergone." I was shy and often self-conscious and would choke when I had to perform under pressure or in front of a crowd. That quote helped me to lose myself and flow with the situation. Rather throwing a punch, shooting pool, or whatever, if I could get out of my head, I could do well. Also, I realize Bruce did not invent this, but we'll get to that later. So what is JKD? What makes it different from other martial arts? First, I'd like to address people's apprehensions about Bruce's art and the people who practice it, which are understandable. Many JKD people misinterpret JKD's principles on freedom and individuality as an excuse for mediocrity. Also, you can read articles from a dozen JKD masters and get at least 6 opinions about what JKD is or is not, none of which seem to jive. Look at the JKD emblem. The Cantonese script around the yin and yang says no way as way, no limitation as limitation. But Jeet Kune Do means way of the intercepting fist. Which is it? The way of intercepting or no way as way? This is aggravated by the fanboys who drone on about Lee's supernatural abilities, which can be grating to martial artists who have spent their life developing some incredible skills of their own. The thing is, JKD is a process, not a product. The process will create a product, but that product will be different for each person. Also, it has to be stressed Bruce Lee died suddenly at 33, so not only is this style not a style, but it is a process that is incomplete. And not only is the product different for each person, the process is not also exactly the same either. So instead of arguing about which teacher is doing it right, let's look at Bruce's process. Most people break Bruce's art down into 3 phases: modified Wing Chun, Junfan Kung Fu, and Jeet Kune Do. As with almost everything, there is a disagreement as to what constitutes what. I agree with there being 3 phases, but since the naming and where changes took place can be in debate, I'm going to go with something a little bit more concrete, something I can show proof for. We're going to break the phases down by books that were published. The first phase being Chinese Kung Fu, the second phase being Bruce Lee's fighting method, and the third being the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. We can't really look to the publishing date of these books. 2 of them were published after he died. And by the way, I'm going to refer to the Fighting Method series as 1 book, but it was actually 4. but we do have an account of about when they were written, 63, 66, and 70 respectively. A little bit of a history on Bruce. He was born in San Francisco but raised in Hong Kong. There he had several influences. His father passed on some Tai Chi. He and his brother participated in Western boxing and fencing at the local Y, and of course he began learning Wing Chun from the legendary Yip Man. Bruce was also a bit of a hoodlum and ran with a gang, their chief rivals being Choy Lai Foot practitioners. Bruce would later move to the United States and begin teaching a modified form of Wing Chun. Why modified? Well, the terrain differences between Hong Kong and Central California were hard to miss. While Wing Chun was perfect for the cramped alleyways in Hong Kong, it was less than ideal for an Oakland parking lot. Another reason is Bruce did not complete his training with Yip Man, and by most accounts only had about a quarter to a third of the art. Bruce was a hell of a dancer though, and he would trade cha-cha lessons for kung fu lessons with various masters in and around the Bay Area, filling in the holes of his original art. To get a good snapshot of this era, we look to our first book, Chinese Kung Fu, The Philosophical Art of Self-Defense, published in 1963. Most of what you see is Wing Chun. Some of it is clearly not Wing Chun, but still of Chinese origin. This era would come to a halt with the now legendary fight between Bruce and Wong Jackman. This fight has been bastardized by at least one major Hollywood movie, and God knows how many cheap Hong Kong flicks. But by the accounts I read, it was not a Shaw Brothers epic kung fu battle, but a street fight in a strip mall. Despite winning, Bruce was less than thrilled with his performance, feeling the fight had lasted too long and that he got too winded. This would inspire him to abandon his modified Wing Chun and start something new. After the fight with Wong, Bruce's fighting style shifted from a Wing Chun to a boxing base. Again, the book of his art we have from '63 shows him working from a Wing Chun stance. But in Bruce Lee's fighting method, which was created in '66, which has a complete chapter on stance, we see something much more boxing-oriented. And not just the stance, the footwork, the punches, some of the defensive work, and certainly many of the training methods are all from boxing. Wing Chun is still a huge part. There is some trapping and defensive work and other elements, but it flows from a boxing base. We also see the addition of kicking from northern Kung Fu styles, flavored with some Muay Thai and Savate, as well as very early exploration of grappling and ground fighting, which will be expanded in the Dao phase. This is as close as Bruce came to creating a conventional, distinct style. Some call this Jun Fan Kung Fu, others claim Jun Fan was the modified Wing Chun phase. Just for clarification, Jun Fan was Bruce's Cantonese name, and initially was simply the name of his schools. Either way, this statement makes Bruce's intentions pretty clear. I'm having a Kung Fu system drawn up. This system is a combination chiefly of Wing Chun, fencing, and boxing. As for the Kung Fu training, I'll have them written down when it is finished. Boy, it will be it. I am a huge fan of this style and would call it my base art. If you're interested in it, Cold Steel sells a video series by Ron Balicki, which is excellent and a great supplement to these books. I'm going to speculate here a little and share some of my own experience. Those of you who have studied more than a couple martial arts and taught in an informal way will probably have had a similar experience. There is a human desire to create, to take things you like best from different arts and put them together with the desire of creating something new. I would come up with these patterns or routines which were really cool, rolling from boxing to Wing Chun to maybe a Silat takedown and then flowing to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I would share them with my students and we had fun and we learned, but there came a point where these patterns became dead. They became something I was bound to, and some students used them as a crutch or as the truth. I soon realized the point was in the creating of this product, not the product itself, and my job was not to regurgitate patterns for students to learn, but to teach them to create for themselves. And of course, once you have your perfect product, there's a tendency to stop paying attention to the world around you. Jun Fan, or the fighting method phase, is well thought out, not simply an unwieldy collection of techniques as this list might imply. It sometimes borrowed a technique, a training method, strategy, principle, or sometimes just an attitude from one of these arts. But no matter how well thought out, it is still bound by the limitations of what it is. And eventually you'll reach a tipping point where adding more just makes what you've created kind of unwieldy. Your glorious, innovative collection just becomes another classical mess. As much as I love this phase of Bruce's work, I think it's more meaningful that he moved on. I believe he realized that expanding it would cheapen it, almost like repeating your point too many times. It loses its impact. It's not that there is no truth in this phase. There's as much truth here as in any system, but he was looking to go beyond that, and to do so he had to abandon system altogether. You have to empty your cup before it can be filled. If martial arts were Bruce's first passion, his second was philosophy. And just as he drew on fencing, boxing, and kung fu for his fighting art, he drew on Zen, Krishnamurti, and Western empiricism for his intellectual and spiritual side. Remember the quote earlier about turning into a wooden doll? This is classic Zen, losing yourself in an action and becoming one with something greater. There are plenty of books out there on Zen. Zen in the art of archery, Zen guitar, Zen in motorcycle maintenance. The action's irrelevant and does not have to be martial arts, and this becoming one with the action and eventually the universe is, to the best of my understanding, the foundation of Zen, and very much a part of Jeet Kune Do. Krishnamurti was an Indian spiritual figure and philosopher. I have to confess I'm not as knowledgeable about him, but a cursory reading of his work reveals a rejection of individual structured religion in favor of uncovering the wisdom universal to all of them. Something Bruce would do verbatim in his field. Finally, empiricism is a theory that states knowledge comes only or primarily from sensory experience. As applied to a martial artist, you need to look at the reality of combat as it is for you. That means engaging in the most realistic simulated combat you can to discern the truth of your situation. Yes, you are an individual, but you still have to conform to a relationship with the opponent. These ideas were not compatible with a static system. I feel this breaking with a fixed style and looking for the root truth while taking your individuality into account is what the Tao of Jeet Kune Do is about, and what the final phase of this cycle is. For security, the unlimited living is turned into something dead, a chosen pattern that limits. To understand Jeet Kune Do, one ought to throw away all ideals, patterns, styles. In fact, he should throw away even the concepts of what is or isn't ideal in Jeet Kune Do. Can you look at a situation without naming it? Naming it, making it a word, causes fear. The Tao of Jeet Kune Do was published in 1975, 2 years after his death. It was compiled of his writings and drawings, most of which were done in 1970, so it completes our chronology pretty well. I would argue that this final philosophical JKD was a far more daunting challenge than the previous incarnations. It was a collection of loose ideas which were not completely tied together. You also have to remember all those classic Bruce Lee movies everyone loves were created between 1971 and 1973. He did not have the time to dedicate to this he had before, and then, out of nowhere, he dies. This does not make what he did any less profound, but it does make the final phase clearly unfinished. He was still in this process when he passed away. To a degree, we are left to figure out the ending ourselves, hence why we have so many people disagreeing about what is or is not his art. For me, I don't contest people coming to a different conclusion as to the meaning. I think that is part of the beauty, actually. My objection is the assumption that a given individual's conclusion is not right for them. You could say that makes me a relativist, but we are talking about an art, not a science. In some cases, truth is relative. Let's talk about the differing opinion among JKD instructors for a moment. He essentially had schools in Seattle, Oakland, and Los Angeles. Around 1969 was when he traveled to Hong Kong to pursue his acting career, only coming back to the U.S. once in a while to visit. Where did he show up? Along the western end of America. Many of these schools could go a long time without seeing Bruce, and we could see how rapidly he was changing. None of these guys are lying, but their information was likely constantly out of date. So what can we get out of this? As martial artists, the message is pretty clear. Explore, avoid stagnation, and find your own way. But can this be applied outside of martial arts? Well, as I said, Bruce was heavily influenced by Krishnamurti, who basically invented the JKD approach to religion and spirituality. He said, "Your prejudices, your fears, your authorities, your churches, new and old, all these, I maintain, are a barrier to understanding. I cannot make myself clearer than this. I do not want you to agree with me. I do not want you to follow me. I want you to understand what I am saying." I think it is safe to say that this has much wider application. Man is more important than any system because a system is nothing but a tool. Even systems whose purpose is to teach us discipline are not meant to be a shackle you carry with you for the rest of your life. You conform to it to learn to do so. Once you have the ability to apply self-discipline and understand the value of doing so, it's up to you when to apply it. One reason someone may be drawn to a system is because it's a convenient way of expressing their personality, true or not. I can say I am pro-gun, anti-drug war, pro-free market economy, pro-individual freedom/responsibility, and support limited government, or I could simply say I'm a libertarian, which is a lot easier. The issue is that other people's perception of what a libertarian is probably not the same as mine. I think I am conveying my values of individuality and freedom, while some will think I'm a nihilistic anarchist. Lastly, systems, including fighting systems, are not stagnant. They too change over time. You might have been calling yourself a Catholic, Democrat, or whatever for the last 30 years. Stop paying attention only to realize one day that the group you supported left you a long, long time ago, and you've been misrepresenting yourself. One thing that has always troubled me is how a person can be drawn to a political system based on one issue. They may be pro-gun or pro-choice and choose the appropriate party, only to accept a bunch of garbage because a political party is a collection of beliefs which may, but usually are not, consistent. Political systems are tools too, just not ours. I suppose a better term for them would be a weapon. By the way, if you feel like you are being disloyal by dropping a system, I argue that loyalty belongs to people, not things. Ignoring these systems leads to ignorance. Being shackled to them leads to a loss of self and tribalism. The truth, like many things, lies somewhere in the center. Keep your eyes open, explore, apply logic, follow your heart when it's appropriate, allow others the room to do the same. You are more than your race, religion, sex, preference, political inclination, style, or any other box people wish to put you in. Or, as Bruce would say, man, the living creature, the creating individual, is always more important than any established style or system. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you're a martial artist, boxer, what have you, please check out h2hmartialarts.com for unique and innovative equipment. Have a great day.